go.
D for Damien.
Whoa!
There's the McCity clutch right there.
The door gets frozen down there.
Oh, was it open?
Yeah, it was open.
Oh,
It just sticks like
I
that.
thought
So
like the thing was.
no. There's a big old hole in the engine bay that I think it's time for us to tackle. So we have our engine pretty much fully assembled, ready to go in. The intake manifold is just sitting on here, but I'm ready to go ahead and get it off the engine stand. And the first thing we're gonna do is install our brand new competition clutch triple disc. This is a 7.25 inch drag spec'd clutch. Now, the difference between this and a stock style one is that this actually is a push style throwout bearing instead of a pull style. So not only does it replace the clutch fork, but it also has a different master cylinder. Because of that, we're gonna have to go ahead and swap out our old one for this one, bolt it up, run some of these lines, and then we can go ahead and focus on bolting a flywheel to the motor and getting all the clutch alignment tool in, getting all the discs lined up, and then that bolted and torqued to the motor. So this is what we're gonna do. Nothing crazy with this. Looks like the bracket's pretty much already prefabbed. I am going to probably look over the instructions just to make sure that I am doing it right, because at this rate, I would hate to lose it because we have an issue with this clutch. First thing they say to do is we have this spring assembly that would essentially hook to our old clutch fork and keep it like pushed forward. So there's always some like return tension on it. But since we're switching the directions, we're gonna have to pull that off and then pull this bolt out, as well as these two bolts down here to loosen up the actual slave cylinder itself, because we're gonna be dishing it all together. And the only thing we should be reusing is this line here and our banjo. We're gonna have to undo the actual slave itself. Now it's nice and free. You know, I hate to say it, but they want us to drain the master cylinder, and I don't. Like, not even a little bit. I hate brake fluid, and clutch fluid is also brake fluid. So what we're gonna do is we're just going to crack this, take it off, and slap it on the new one right away. So we only have to bleed a little bit of air instead of the whole system. Now I'm stuck. Now maybe you should, now maybe you should get me that. Pretty please. Oh shoot. Can you see that other one? It was close to my foot here. We got one of the crush washers already on there. Luckily, I don't think much fluid's gonna drain out just because I've got it tipped up. But I think it probably aligns. Something where the actual banjo itself fits in this little groove right here. Bugga dugga. You know, they probably have some sort of torque spec or something for this, but because there's crush washers, as long as it doesn't leak, I would say you're probably. Now we have all the fluid going into this. We need to figure out what to do or to mount this bracket. And this bolt that we just took out goes in this hole right here. But I don't know if you can see, we're not gonna be getting no bolt through that hole with it bolted to there, because Those are some big ass Allen bolts. That's way too big.
Oh.
Yep, that's an 8. And that's it. That is it. I love this 1/4 inch Milwaukee Impact. It doesn't have enough torque to really like, you know, break like lug nuts or anything free, but it is seriously the best for like assembling and stuff like this, like these style of bolts, just because it puts just enough torque on there that doesn't break the bolt. It says align here. So you could have it in these 2 sets of holes or these outer sets of holes, it looks like. That's kind of cool. I just realized that we're not gonna be able to bolt this bracket on, unfortunately, because it goes over the tab of the starter and then utilizes the bolt hole. So we're just gonna leave it loose for now. We did get this bolt run through and nut put on. But what we can do is take our new clutch fork and go ahead and get that put in there, and the actual slave cylinder that goes inside the transmission put in. Now that we don't have to worry about connecting the throwout bearing to the clutch for the pull style, we can go ahead and just do all this now and the motor should just go right in. So super awesome. I wish Subaru would have done the push style from the factory, but unfortunately we're kind of left with the aftermarket world taking it on. So yeah, like I said, we got our new clutch fork here. This is supplied by Competition Clutch. This is a stock slave. And then all this is gonna do is feed through and then lock into the transmission through this little groove here. I do want to inspect this spot here where this sits in, just to make sure we don't have any cracks or anything like that. Because if that tab or that area breaks off or cracks at any point, your bell housing of transmission is pretty much toast. There's no re-welding that back in there, there's no nothing. So make sure it's aligned right the first time, and yeah. All right, found some grease. So we're gonna go ahead and what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna lube up the inside of the clutch fork, and then we'll just slide this shaft through. As you can see, if you look inside there, there's like 2 different races. We'll just do the one and then the other. It's not like all the way through. This is obviously a clutch fork. What it does is the actual slave cylinder here, or I guess you could say a master cylinder, would essentially push on this. So as you push the clutch in, this rod extends and then it pushes on this spot right here, which when it's fixed inside the transmission with this shaft that we're gonna put in, it will cause the fork to push on a throwout bearing here, which will in turn disengage or put pressure on the pressure plate of the clutch, which will therefore loosen the actual discs or cause them to be free. When you let out the clutch, it comes back, which causes pressure on the pressure plate to re-engage the discs, which allows you to actually be one-to-one from the motor into the drivetrain. Before, on Subaru does what's called a pull style. So this cylinder, instead of facing this direction, faces this direction, which pushes on a clutch fork, which in turn causes it to go back, pulling the pressure plate, disengaging the discs. When you think about how much energy it takes to pull versus push in this kind of situation, when you're talking about a pressure plate that has something in the ballpark of like 26,000 PSI of springs on that pressure plate that apply pressure to the clutch discs, pulling that amount of pressure is probably way, way, way harder to do, and which would essentially cause a harder pedal feel than say where you would push on that. When we're talking about drag racing, for instance, and we're trying to make these split-second shifts, one of the issues I feel that I had was the pull style clutch just being so difficult to disengage those discs that I couldn't make split-second shifts. It would just lock me out because it took so much energy to do it that if that energy fell away, essentially those discs would just hook back up. And as I'm going to shift, they're hooked up. Obviously, you're not going to be able to shift into another gear. When we talk about how are we able to make those split-second shifts, this is where this style of clutch would come into play, because less energy should allow us to be able to apply it, make split-second shifts, and not have any sort of lockout issue. This clutch that I'm putting in now has been used on several high horsepower drag Subarus. It is like a drag spec from Competition Clutch and IAG. So I'm very confident in this. It's gonna come up through our boot here. What I need is a bolt just like this, which is gonna be like a standard 10mm bolt, like an intake manifold bolt, whatever. This is how you get this pin out. So this is how we're also gonna put it back in. Like I said, I put some grease on the inside of the clutch fork here. We're gonna come from the side and we're just gonna go ahead and shove that guy through. There we go. So there's some tangs inside of this little eyelet here that the actual shaft has to go into. Once it goes in, you know, obviously it's in, but now you can see when this slave pushes on it, this clutch fork now pushes forward, which will in turn push a throw-out bearing onto the clutch. Before, it would come from the other side, causing it to pull. Now that we got the shaft in there, there is an access hole from the side of the transmission here on the side, which in turn is a 14mm Allen. You're gonna need this. Essentially all we're gonna do is just go ahead and thread that into the side. And this plug locks that shaft in place, so the shaft can't go back and forth. And now that shaft and the clutch fork is pretty much in place. It can move side to side, but as far as front and back, it can't go front or back. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I went ahead and I cleaned off the actual input shaft here. I could probably clean it off a little bit better. Just getting some of the old grease on there because I'm gonna put some new stuff on there. When you're applying grease to this guy, we're not like lathering it in grease. Essentially, all we're trying to do is create it as like a lubricant, not a coating, right? Because if you have like glumps or a whole bunch of grease on there, and that's gonna be spinning around, and it's spinning around at 9,000 RPM, that grease is gonna fling outwards all the way across, and it could just coat the clutch disc, which will cause you to lose clutch life. So we're not trying to do that. We are just trying to make it where when the discs come in contact with there, that they just slide on. At this point, I think we're ready to bust out that new triple disc and see what it's gonna look like on that sexy Stage 4 Extreme from IAG. What do you say? Yeah? Huh? Chain links all like ground down. They've been drugged down the highway or something. Just gonna go It's a moment of truth, man. This makes it real, guys. This makes this motor going in this car 100% real. It's a little top heavy. All right, from here, pretty much time to go ahead and get a flywheel and then a clutch on this thing. Not sure what this tag says, but attention. IAG short block requires ARP 14mm head studs, IAG firelock head gaskets, and fire rings, which are not included. Please call IAG. Oh, the other one says require a special torque procedure. Download the instructions. Did all that, thanks IAG. If you're wondering what all those were, I'll put a link up here in the screen to some of the videos that I reference it in. Just go check those out. So, this is our beautiful new triple disc. And I left it sealed up in the packaging because it's probably oily, and I don't know if you ever dealt with clutches before, but they're kind of gross. Let's go ahead and bust into this guy. It's kind of beautiful, man. So this diameter of clutch is a 7.25 inch disc. So the diameter of this surface here is 7.25 inches. The clutch we ran in our last one was a 9 inch. So more surface area with the old one, but I think that surface area actually bit us in the ass. Whereas this one, less surface area, less rotating mass, and less clutch disc engagement. So hopefully we should be able to make those split-second shifts this time and be able to actually hold more torque because this is a triple disc instead of a twin disc. Looks like these bolts here, these Allen bolts are 6. All we're gonna do is just break them free. Hopefully they're not ridiculous. Did you see that come up? We kind of learned something new there. I learned something, we all learned something, and that was pretty much that this being torqued down is actually putting pressure on these little fins here, because when we got these 3 out, as soon as I undid the 4th one, these came up, and when this is torqued back down, it should push those back down again, which means that you need to undo this in a crisscross pattern, which I should have done, didn't do. Learn from my mistakes. I'm an idiot. So, this is basically just a billet pressure plate, nothing crazy. You can see this ring here is holding this other ring, which are the actual fins. But this is all just, this piece is probably just a billet aluminum piece. And now we can get into the actual discs themselves. So these silver ones, these are floaters. And these are just essentially intermediate plates that align these actual discs themselves. As you can see on the disc, it says trans side of trans disc. We pull the intermediate plate off, this top one, which I'm going to assemble it again the exact same way that it came apart, just to make sure that everything is good. But yeah, as we pull this disc up here, see it says trans side of trans disc. That means this side of the disc should be facing the transmission, because as we pull it up, I can almost guarantee you it's gonna say something different. Nope. So it looks like they're only labeled for the trans side. Man, those discs are tiny. And all these will be aligned when we actually go to bolt it onto the motor. But what we're trying to get access to is these bolts here, because we need to bolt this flywheel to the motor. Now, it looks like this comes with a pilot bearing installed, which is cool. Otherwise, you'd have to install a pilot bearing at this time. We're gonna go ahead and clean this up, at least these bolt areas, and once we get it bolted onto the motor and torqued, we can go ahead and clean this surface. This flywheel is not lightweight by any means. Like, this flywheel is heavy. I don't believe in lightweight flywheels, not for Subaru motors. Because they're horizontally opposed, they're balanced by the actual rotating of the motor itself, that if you start adding lightweight components like a flywheel or a lightweight crank pulley or something like that, you're really only gonna screw up the balance of the motor itself. It may be good for other types of motors, but not for Subarus. So I would highly suggest, if you're watching these videos and you're enjoying all this and you're like, oh dude, I'm gonna totally build a motor, do all this stuff because of BigSkyBoosted, listen to me with this. Don't do lightweight anything. Just do OEM, whatever it is as far as weight goes, and call it a day. We're gonna go ahead and take our bolts that are supplied, which I'm almost positive. Yeah, these are ARP Pros. So, top of the line products for this build, for sure. There's gonna be a lot of vibrations and stuff with this build. Just power brings noise, harshness, and vibration, NVH. And this being directly bolted to the crankshaft, it will end up leaving marks in there if it's not completely bolted upright, because it'll kind of wobble or whatever. So that's why we would use something like an ARP bolt, because we can apply way more torque and it will have more clamping force. So if you look inside this, there's like a ridge here. You know, this pilot bearing is sitting recessed in this hole. If you come over here to the crankshaft, and you actually look at the crankshaft has a piece that is actually protruding. And all that's really gonna happen is this recessed part of the flywheel is going to sit right around that part of the crankshaft. Lines it right off the rip, and then we just gotta basically bolt up or line up the bolt holes. So essentially, and you want to install this dry, like no grease or anything. Let me grab some Loctite. That's a terrible sound. So we got ourselves some Loctite 242 blue thread locker. Put a nice old dab on there. Don't be shy with this. You do not, I repeat, do not want these bolts backing out. It really truly is. And I love seeing that ARP Pro logo on there. Have to get out pry bar and the BFTW. Do you know what BFTW stands for? Big fucking torque wrench. We got our BFTW, is that what we call it? Yeah, BFTW. And we're gonna torque all these bolts here to 53 foot-pounds. Now, I'm gonna need some assistance. from my people. All right, crisscross pattern on this guy. And just like that, we got a flywheel, holy shit. It's real. So that one is the only one that looks to be like a special one. And because it has like that hump that actually sits down inside. These other ones here, these are just thin little intermediate plates. Honestly, I don't think that matters which side they go. Look at that. So now we've pretty much got our clutch assembly built here. And all this really gonna happen is this smaller shaft here is gonna go directly inside the pilot bearing. And we are just going to line up our actual bolt holes within the clutch. So something like that. There's a trick. If you turn if it's not going in, turn it back the other way. And in these two cases, I hear a click and then I thread this free, just like that. Hear that? Here, I'll do it again. Right here. Now they just thread in like butter. Now we can go ahead and torque the actual bolts themselves. The torque spec, I guess, that competition clutch, after some investigation, is factory spec, which I'm almost positive is like 11.6 foot-pounds, which isn't very much. But they want you to do it in a star pattern, basically. And they want these actual diaphragm fins to either be parallel or slightly facing up. So when we disassembled it, you saw them go from parallel to completely up. So we're gonna see what it's like torquing it to only 11.6 foot-pounds. So all I'm gonna do with this little tiny bit of grease on the inside, we're just gonna go ahead and stick it on, and how it goes on is right now is exactly how it goes. Just go back and forth, 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 back and forth. I understand why it's machined that way now, because when the clutch fork is tipped back like this, it's at like an angle, this sits in there and it causes it to not be able to go back and forth or side to side to where it's stationary. I get it. And then probably if you were to push it all the way out, it's kind of the same thing. Makes sense now, boys. On that note, guys, we're gonna go ahead and end this one out. We did run into one slight issue, and that happens to be with our new competition clutch, the actual slave cylinder and the line there. The supplied hard line that they supplied us actually has the wrong fittings on it, unfortunately. But if I make a run to the parts store tomorrow to get some 3/16 hardline, I can just steal the fittings off of the stock one and then rebend it, reflare. I already have all the tools to do that. But as you can see, the motor is on the engine hoist. It does have a clutch and a flywheel bolted up to it, and it is 100% ready to go in the car. So in the morning, I'll address the clutch deal. We'll get that all sorted. And in the next video, you guys are gonna get to see me put this motor in the car, hopefully for the final time. Other than that, we're gonna end up able to start building the fuel system, start wiring, start plumbing, start doing everything to get us our first fire up. Guys, I'm freaking jazzed to be talking about putting some smoke in the pipe. I mean, whew. Damn, it's been a long time coming, but we are right here. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, do me a favor, click the subscribe button down below for me. I say it every time, but I truly would appreciate it. So, again, if you like this also, don't forget to drop a like down below. Share this with a couple of your buddies or something. You know, maybe they might find this useful too. Who knows? But with that, we'll catch you guys in the next go around. Later.